So we have officially hit that point in the year when all of the fanfare is over, all of the new products have been announced and have launched, and now as we sort of enter the holiday season, it looks like Apple is sort of wrapping things up for the year. There is not going to be another event. There is not going to be any last-minute product announcements, knock on wood. But what we have now looking sort of ahead into 2022 is really exciting, and I think this was a really good year for Apple. But we now have to play the waiting game and just have to wait and see what Apple plans to do next. So this is going to be a little bit of a different episode of the podcast, one that we haven't really had before because there's been so much news, but we're going to break down everything you need to know this week. Of course, if you guys would give us a rating in the iTunes podcast directory. What do they even call it these days? Just the podcast
I think Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, that would give us I'm dating myself. That would really help us a lot. We appreciate all the comments, reviews, and also if you enjoy the video version, if you didn't even know it existed, we do have a video version of the Apple Circle podcast. You can check it out on YouTube, linked in the description if you're listening to the audio version, or if you just want to go on YouTube, type in Apple Circle podcast, it will pop right up. And we also want to hear from you guys. This is an interactive show. You can text us, call us at the Apple Circle hotline, 949-354-3508, so we can hear from you. We can text, we can chat, we can hear your feedback, hear how you're liking your new products, or if you need some buying advice, especially as we enter into the holiday season, Matt and I can be your Apple gurus and tell you what to buy and what to not buy. I think that's all the housekeeping out of the way. Matt, how are you doing? I have a really important question for you, but first, how you doing? How's your week going?
Doing good so far. Everything's, it's calming down after the storm. We had so many new products, everything. I did get a new Apple product, though. Maybe this is the question you were going to ask me, but Apple Watch Series 7 stainless steel. It is in the house, and I like it. I'm very happy with this purchase decision. I love the stainless steel. This yellow band that it came with was the only option. I like the band. I don't like the color, but I'm just using it for now because I paid for it, so might as well use it.
I'm surprised I guess chip shortage and all that, but everything is so delayed. I guess my mom doesn't listen to this. Hopefully she doesn't. We ordered my mom for her birthday a Series 7. She has a Series 2. She's got a really old Apple Watch, so this was quite an upgrade for her, and I was kind of going through the configurator, and you have to be very specific about the bands because a difference in band color can delay shipping by like 3 or 4 weeks. Yep. So I had to
and some are just not even available.
Yeah, so I just had to get just the white band. And luckily, that's a really easy swap because I feel like you could just walk into the Apple store and just buy a new band.
Yeah, they're not too expensive depending on which one you want, and they're readily available most of the time.
This is another reason why I wish they would just sell the watches separately. Anyways, I got to ask you about the stainless steel, but my other question was actually not about that. It was about your 14-inch MacBook Pro. A lot has changed over the last week. I'm sort of thinking about this. I still don't have my computer yet. Maybe next week, we'll see. But I guess 2 questions. One is, are you keeping that laptop now after you've played with it for a week? And also, do you have any regrets? Because from what I've seen, there is ever so slightly some performance improvements with the 16-inch over the 14-inch. So kind of what are your thoughts 1 week later?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts 1 week later are I still love this computer. It is excellent. It is the fastest laptop I've ever had, even though it is the base model 10-core 14-inch. So the 16-inch Intel computer that I have, which is sitting right here, I'm still using it for a lot of stuff because it's so optimized for all the little programs and stuff that I definitely am forgetting if I just switch over to it. But comparing it, because I kind of went back to back editing video in Final Cut Pro with both the 16-inch and the 14-inch, which is back in my eyesight, so I'm looking beyond the camera. But let me put it this way. So my 16-inch is a Core i9. I believe it is a top model CPU at the time that it was available, but it had the mid-range GPU, which I think is the same computer you have.
I think so. I think we have the same spec.
Yeah, which basically means it's a very powerful computer. It could be a little faster on the graphics, but in terms of processing and everything, it's about as good as you can get. This 10-core M1 Pro, so not the Max, the M1 Pro on the 14-inch laptop destroys it. It's not even a comparison really when it comes to Final Cut Pro, which is basically what we do. It's funny. There's always, every time there's a new laptop that comes out, and all the reviews come out, they always compare it to Final Cut Pro and like how that performance is. And everyone, or not everyone, but like in the comments, you often see people complaining like, well, what about all these other tasks? Why do you always just do video editing? Well, it's like, well, we make videos for a living. So this is this is the easiest way to compare it. Sure, you might not be making videos, but video editing is often a very intensive task that really challenges the CPU. But this 14-inch base model, like I said, for the M1 Pro, at least for the 10 core, is excellent. Works really well. Now, there's a few things that really go into that. So the videos that we shoot are often ProRes. So these chips have ProRes acceleration natively built in. It's almost like the, what is it called for the Mac Pro? The Afterburner. It's basically built into this computer at this point. So that I think I'm definitely noticing. The other thing, though, is the video that you're watching right now for this podcast is actually using the Canon R6. Now, that is notorious because it uses the H.265 encoding. And basically, these Intel computers don't have decoding for that. So your computer is just chugging along for what are basic, like they're really small files in the grand scheme of things. They're pretty lightweight in terms of like what the footage actually is, but these Intel computers just can't handle it. Apple Silicon has that built in. I remember when like the EOS R5 first came out, which is from Canon. That was maybe like 6 months, maybe a year ago at this point now. Jeez, time's flying. But anyway, there was so many people complaining that you can't really edit this on Mac computers, but then you can import it to your iPad and it would just like butter cut through it. And that's because of Apple's, it has support for H.265. So those two things just instantly make it better for editing. But even just beyond that, like the rendering times, the processing times, all of that stuff has been significantly faster, not to mention just using the computer. It's been great. I really like it. Now, to the other question, will I be keeping this particular model? I'm sticking with the 14-inch. I went to the Apple Store over the weekend and played around with the 16-inch just to see what the feel was like, because we've said this before in past episodes, but we have the 16-inch now, and it is definitely a chunky boy. Like, man, I hate traveling with it. And granted, we're not doing nearly as much travel as we used to, but, I mean, hopefully in the future we'll be able to travel more. The 14-inch is the way to go for me. Any minor gains that might be there in our workflow and my workflow just does not seem worth it. I'm all in on this 14-inch. But I do think I'm going to have to get an M1 Max. I want that power. There were 2 times that I can remember where I did get a beach ball for like 5 seconds and then it went away. And that happened twice. My other computer, my Intel 16-inch, that happens pretty often actually. So it's definitely better, but it's not perfect. So I want that Max. I don't know if I'm going to go to the full 64 core GPU or anything like, or 64, 32 core. I can't remember. These numbers always get mixed up in my head. Yeah, M1 Max has 32 core GPU, but 64 gigs of RAM. I think that's what it is. I don't know if I'm going to go quite that far, but I'm definitely going to get the M1 Max because I want that power.
What's so crazy about this, too, is that we're now at the point where the new MacBook Pros are being compared to the Mac Pros, and they're beating the Mac Pros, which is just mind-boggling. I remember not that long ago when that Mac Pro came out, and it looks beautiful, and it's quiet, and it's powerful, and now for a fraction of the price, you could get a computer that sort of beats it in a lot of ways, which is just absolutely crazy. So I am chomping at the bits to finally get away from this Intel machine and finally try this computer. Hopefully, maybe next week. UPS is sort of in limbo. It popped up that it's coming, but now they don't know when it's coming. So we'll see. But it's been really interesting to see sort of the differences between 14 and 16, because it seems like the 16 has a slight advantage, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like enough to quantify the move up, and I don't know. I think that if you have a 14-inch, I don't know if it really means you need to go return it and go get a 16. I have seen multiple people return their 14s for the 16s, but I don't know. Do you think that's really worth it? I think we're sort of splitting hairs at this point.
I'll say this, and this is for a lot of people maybe a controversial sentence, but if you're making YouTube videos, which a lot of the people that we are seeing do this, like return process and like get the 16-inch, if you're making YouTube videos, even if you're shooting on red like Marquez, you'll be fine with the 14-inch.
I think there's definitely every episode we talk about the Twitter tech echo chamber. It's so easy to get this FOMO of like, oh my gosh, I need to have the 16. I need this and I need that. Give it like a month, and then all this will like settle and the dust will settle and you can just be happy with what you want. I would get what you want and what works with your workflow, not get the maxed out, 16-inch with 64 gigs of RAM because it's going to be better in like one benchmark. I would just, go with what you want and be happy with it, because they're all, at the end of the day, crazy powerful. And like you said, depending on your task, you probably don't need or would even notice that difference.
Right. And then I think the other buying decision that you always have to keep in mind is buy what you can afford. Yeah. I mean, these computers are not cheap by any means. So maybe you don't need that 8 terabyte SSD. Like, you'll be fine. Like, you can use external storage. You can get a 2 terabyte. We've been living with 2 terabytes and like a terabyte for years. Not having 8 terabytes is not going to destroy you. So buy what you can afford. If you can afford that 8 terabyte, go for it. If you can't, don't feel bad. You're still getting a great computer.
Super, super exciting stuff with the new MacBook Pros, and they just seem to be better. I went to the Apple Store to pick up 2 like random things, a case and an AirTag, but while I was there, I did get a little bit of time to spend with the new MacBook Pros on display. That was super cool. They look great. The reviews are kind of true. Like, these are probably the best Apple laptops ever. Definitely the best ones in the last 10 years or so, and these are Apple did a great job. Credit where credit's due. I guess kind of in other sort of more relevant Apple news, macOS Monterey came out, which I feel like every year I'm getting less and less excited about new macOS versions, and I almost kind of forget when they're coming. And it was kind of a weird release this year. They used to do it. I feel like they used to do it earlier. Didn't they used to drop all of them at once, where iOS and iPadOS and macOS would all come out? Now they just sort of keep pushing it down the line. And I think macOS Monterey came out last week, and it's got some new features. Not everything is there. Have you upgraded?
Bugs,
and what's your experience been so far?
I have not upgraded on the computer, the 16-inch that I have, the Intel that I was talking about. I haven't upgraded there just because I don't really care to. I have been using it, though, on this 14-inch because it ships with it, and it's the same. Like, I don't really notice any differences. I kind of like the new wallpaper, even though they didn't shoot any like real wallpapers of Monterey, which is kind of interesting. They usually do that. But other than that, it seems the same. Like, I don't really notice any differences. And I think the reason for that is because most of the changes and updates, if you go to the Apple website and like see what Monterey has, it's all just like features from the iPhone and the iPad, which is like the quick notes, the share for FaceTime, a bunch of those things that personally I'm not using anyway, so it's not affecting how I use this computer. And it's another reason why I'm not rushing at all to actually update my main computer. There have been some bugs, though, this memory leak where people are just using normal apps like Mail, and suddenly it's like using all of your memory, and you have to force quit because it's just there's something going wrong there. Clearly, that's a leak, and that'll probably get patched relatively quickly because it seems like a lot of people are experiencing it. So I'm sure Apple's going to fix that. But yeah, I'm not too excited about it. I think the last time I was excited was when they did the redesign to this kind of what would you call it? iOS style.
Yeah.
Like what was that?
Was that I think that was Big Sur, right?
Big Sur. Let me look.
It's so confusing these days to figure out which one is which. I don't think it was Catalina. I think it was Big Sur.
No, because Big Sur is what we have now.
But wasn't that was it Catalina? This is how much I actually care about new Mac.
Oh, you know
versions.
What? I think you're right. Yeah, this is riveting content, but
yeah,
we got to figure this one out. No, yeah, it was Big Sur. Wait, was this the actual big change?
Yeah, I think this was it. Which
it's
is
only
crazy
been a year?
because, yeah.
Jeez, that's crazy. I really feel like we've had this forever. No, you're right.
I know.
The control center and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I remember now.
All the features that I never use. I never use Control Center. I never use all that stuff. I use my.
I actually do use Control Center, but I don't like it very much. It feels like it needs a touchscreen for Control Center to work properly. But yeah, interesting. I thought it had been longer, but yeah, it's only been a year. Well, there you go. That was the last one I was excited for.
Yeah, it was really sad, too, this week because I realized that my iMac back there is no longer really useful in Apple's eyes. I'll never forget, I made a big mistake. I should have, when the M1 MacBook Air and MacBook Pro came out, I looked at like what the trade-in value of this is. This is a late 2014. It was a higher spec. Let me look here real quick. Now I'm going to do this live. It was this is a late 2014. It's got the i7 4 gigahertz, 24 gigs of RAM. Oh, 24 gigs of RAM? I guess I put more RAM in there.
You must have updated that.
It's got the highest end at the time, the 4 gigabyte AMD Radeon R9. And it was, by all accounts, not a bad computer when I got it. And it was good, it was new, and it was great. Now, when those M1s came out, I looked at the trade-in, and Apple was offering $500. I'm like, oh, maybe that's not that bad. I should probably do that.
Not bad, actually.
Then, like, 2 weeks later, look back again, and it's now on the vintage list, which means they offer you nothing. And so I was like, okay, whatever. So
recycle it. They'll recycle it for you.
I know. I mainly use this for like Twitter, Slack. Like, it's just kind of like nice to have like another big monitor here. And I was like, oh, I'll get up here in Monterey. I was trying to fiddle with some stuff for a video, and I went to go up to Monterey, and it's like, this version of macOS is not available. I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, it's been a while since I've updated it. Let me update this to the latest version of, I think it's Big Sur. So I updated, got everything up to date, good to go, and then it said again, it's not available. So I'm like, oh, let me just Google and see what is compatible with Monterey, and typed it in, and nope. Only 2015 and newer. So this is now vintage and like will no longer get updates, which is crazy because in my mind, this feels like it wasn't even that long ago that I got this, but it's old. So
2014 is a long time ago.
No Monterey on this. I won't do it on my main computer until I have to. So I guess when I get that new laptop, I'll have to. But
yeah, definitely. But so interestingly, one of the main features for Monterey that didn't actually come and is supposed to be coming later is universal control. Mm-hmm. That seems like a feature you would love, especially since you're using two computers, but you're not going to be able to use it.
I know. Well, I would. The idea of doing it between like the iPad and the Mac is cool, though I don't think I'd ever use that just because I never have my iPad set up on my Mac. And for the people with computers, if you have Macs and PCs, this was all attainable before with just software. So I used to use a program called Synergy that would do this. Now I use one called Barrier that basically lets you use one keyboard and mouse with multiple computers. So I can use just the keyboard and mouse with my main Mac, which you can't see, with this iMac over there, and that's been fine.
How does that work? So is it basically almost like it's an external display and you don't even notice the difference?
The latency is great. I've never had any issues with it. Basically, it's like a client server kind of thing. So your host computer, your one with the keyboard and mouse, is like the server. So that one is the one that has the input of the keyboard and mouse. And then you run the client on the other computer. So the iMac runs the client. And then whatever magic it does, I can just move my cursor just to kind of tell it in like the preference pane. Is it above? Is it to the left or the right? Whatever. Put it to the right, and then my cursor just goes right over there and it just works. I think there's some fancier stuff too. Like you can like share the clipboard. You can drag and drop files across. I just use it just to basically move my mouse over there. But I have rarely had ever any issues. And I don't even have any keyboard or mouse connected to it. If I have to restart it, I'll just go into macOS screen share and just like log in, and then I have like the client open like on launch, and then once it boots up I can just use my keyboard and mouse, and it's been great. So that's been nice. And speaking of universal control, it has been interesting to see that Apple more and more lately, they've been announcing features and then releasing them later, and we've seen this for a couple of years, but I feel like it's getting more the norm. That, when Apple announces something big, it's like, oh, don't be surprised if that's delayed for a little bit. And like SharePlay was, and now Universal Control, we don't know when it's coming soon, whenever that is.
Yeah, exactly. I think the first time I remember them really doing that for a big feature was with the iPhone 7 and portrait mode. I know that was one of the big features with the iPhone 7 Plus. The reason it had two cameras was, one, to have zoom, but also to have portrait mode. And that was released later on, and it was still in beta. That was the first time I remember them doing that. The other times they've done it, usually it works out. They usually announce it. Maybe it'll be delayed, but then it'll come out. That did not happen with AirPower. They announced that, said it's coming later. That did not work. I'm trying to think what else they did. Obviously, most recently was with ProRes video on the iPhone 13. What's interesting there, though, is, it really wasn't that late. It's only been a few weeks, and now it's finally out. Like, was it really that not done that they had to, what was? I wonder what the holdup there was, because it wasn't like it was 6 months out or anything. It was only a few weeks, so.
Yeah, I don't understand why they keep doing this, and why, if they have all this time in the beta period, why they aren't trying to work to get this done. It just doesn't seem to make a whole lot
I mean,
of
I'm
sense
sure
to
they
me,
are.
but
I'm sure they are, but it's just like I wonder why they need like 2 more weeks, 3 more weeks. Like, how big of a difference would it have been?
Exactly. I wish I knew the answer to this. Okay, so Monterey is cool. New MacBook Pros.
Well, actually, one thing. Yeah, that's kind of it for like news stuff. One thing though that kind of leads into a little bit with these new MacBooks. Well, there's a few things. Not only what we'll talk about the future of what we're expecting to see, but first I want to talk about what we want Apple to do, because I think we've talked about this for a long time. This would be very beneficial to you with that old iMac. This would be beneficial to me with the 16-inch. What would we want Apple to do? Because there was a new rumor of, or not rumor, it's real. I don't know why I said rumor. Apple's, if you take your phone in to get repaired and it's going to be more of a lengthy process, they're going to actually let you loan out an iPhone XR, so you still have a phone during that period. And that is very interesting. I've never really considered them doing that, because it kind of seems like a process to like get all your stuff on it and then take it off. But that's a great idea. And it got me thinking, like, what else do I want Apple to see that they could easily do, but they just haven't done it? The big one for me is a Mac upgrade program, much like the iPhone. And I think actually just everything should have an upgrade program. That would be great. And they kind of do it with like the Apple Card. You can get 0% financing, which is kind of the same thing, but not really. They do the trade-ins, which you do get some money for your old computer, but it's not the same thing. I would definitely pay. Well, I guess here's a question. What would you do? What would you have to pay? What would you do to actually opt into something like this? Like, would you pay a premium? Would you pay monthly? That's slightly more than what it would be if you just put it on a credit card. What would it take? Like, from Apple's perspective, they're going to have to get something out of it, right? So what would it take for you to actually get into this program if they did it? Which I feel like they might, especially once they're all on Apple Silicon.
I would love to see this, and I think that as I think about it, the iPhone makes so much sense because you're basically paying like half the price ish of the iPhone for the year, and then you turn it in. You could do
so
that
in a year with the iPhone, in 2 years you own the phone. So every year though you can trade it in and get the new one. Yes, it's perpetual leasing, and you're never going to own the phone. Like, if you pay attention to a lot of like finance advice, it's not the best idea, but considering for our jobs and stuff, we do that because it makes a lot of sense to just upgrade every year, because we're doing that anyway. So in the end, it probably doesn't actually save money, but it feels better.
I guess the issue I see with this, and I'd love to see it, is that there's no set upgrade time like there's with the iPhone. So I guess the issue would be that like you'd be paying whatever the price would be, and then you could wait 1 year and then get a new computer, or 2 years, and who knows when the upgrade would be. It'd almost be sort of nice if like you could pay, and this is getting complicated, you could pay like in tiers. Like, it's like, okay, if you paid $200 a month, you got access to a MacBook Air and maybe like a base MacBook Pro. But if you paid $400 a month, then you got access to this spec iMac and a MacBook Pro. It makes a lot of sense. I guess it's just fancy financing for the Mac. And I guess technically
that's what this all is.
There is business leasing that you could do.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say there is actually a program for that for business. Although that's kind of hush hush. I've never actually heard of anyone using it. I'm sure there are plenty of companies that do, but that is a thing Apple does offer.
But I think where this makes, obviously I'd love to see it on the Mac, where this makes even more sense is definitely with the iPhone and the Apple Watch specifically.
Apple Watch for sure.
Even iPad, all of these devices that get upgraded basically every year, they just make so much sense because basically you're paying, half the money. You get Apple Care, and then as long as you sort of, return it in good condition, and Apple's pretty generous on what good condition is. It can have scratches, it can be used, but as long as it works and it's not like demolished, you're fine. Then you can upgrade and sort of do your thing. And I think that makes so much sense. And I don't know why they don't have it for the Apple Watch or the iPad. I'd love to see it. And I'd also love to see it with the Macs. Give us an upgrade program, and I'd be all for that.
Yeah, of all things, I think the one that makes the most sense is the Apple Watch. Not because really the year-over-year updates are so small that a lot of people just aren't upgrading. So it almost seems like money left on the table for people that would upgrade. I mean, yeah, you're not getting the full price immediately, but eventually you're getting more money than you would if you're not upgrading at all. So, I mean, I know if they did an Apple Watch upgrade program, pretty sure I would get into that program.
Oh, yeah.
I like having the newest one, but it just often doesn't seem worth it. But if I was on the upgrade program, I would do that. But I do think it's possible. Well, I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it's possible. I think they'll stick to the financing options, which is basically the same. Like if you use the Apple Card, you get 0% financing, which is kind of the same thing as a 0% loan. Like it's not really different. It's just that you have to pay the whole thing instead of getting the new one every year.
Right.
But with their trade-ins are actually pretty decent. So it's like halfway there. And I think they'd much rather you use the Apple Card. But I think the good point of why we wouldn't have seen this on the Mac and maybe we could see it in the future is because of that upgrade schedule. Now that they're in charge of the silicon, well, this is another question. Do you think we're going to see upgrades every single year to these computers on a timely schedule like we do the iPad and the iPhone?
I think so. I think because, like you said, Apple's in control of their silicon roadmap and they kind of own everything, or at least most of the sort of ins and outs of the computers. I feel like we will see, maybe it's like a TikTok cycle like the iPhone. Maybe one year it's a big redesign, big refresh, big leaps, and then the next year is just more of like smaller stuff. I feel like fine. Like if we have the M1 and then the M2, or even if they want to do, maybe it's the M1X next year, which is sort of the in-between, and that's like the lower end chip. I think that's totally fine. I don't think we need to have these huge leaps every year, but I definitely think that they will follow the iPhone if history is any indicator, and we will get new chips every year, and just some years are just better than others. That makes total sense.
Yeah, and I also wonder like what they will do with the design. Like I think they'll probably much more likely go with the iPad route, because the iPad has been the same since 2018, more or less. It's got an upgraded camera, but the design of it is the same. And there's not really any rumors of that changing anytime soon. That's actually interesting. We haven't heard anything about the new iPads. Assuming there is new iPads. I don't even know what they would do at this point. Put
the only
M1
rumors,
Pro in there or something.
The only rumors I saw were probably, I guess, new processor. Maybe we'll see mini LED come down to 11.
Right.
And then the only other one I've seen has been that it's going to get wireless charging with a glass back, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But
I don't like that.
Which is, again, really interesting. Like, I guess the 2018 iPad Pro was so good and that design was so sleek and modern that even going into 2022, it still looks great. And even as a 2020 iPad owner, I'm good with it. I love the look of the iPad Pro. It's been plenty fast, plenty capable, and maybe we're going to hit that point with the Macs where they've gotten so good and the designs are so good that it's okay if we don't see a huge redesign for 3 or 4 years because it was so good to begin with. Maybe we finally hit that with the Macs and they just sort of do smaller incremental upgrades every 2, 3, 4 years, and then maybe we get some big upgrade, every 4 years, which kind of seems crazy, but maybe not. It's a lot more forgiving on the Mac because the Macs don't get big redesigns all that often. So I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of 2022, we've got new processors. They finish their transition to Apple Silicon. We've got all the new design Macs, and then we don't see a major redesign until 2025, 2026?
Yeah,
probably makes sense, right?
Yeah, I guess one interesting thing though, well, yeah, I'm just trying to think back because we haven't had redesigns of the Macs very often at all. So I'm just trying to think of like when we would maybe see the next one, because I was kind of thinking like they're updating all these Macs so close to each other that they're going to be kind of the same in the line for such a long time. There's not really going to be much of an update there, but that's kind of how it's always been. Like the iMac's been the iMac, the MacBook Airs. I mean, famously, the last MacBook Air, not this current redesign, but the last one, that was released in 2012, and they didn't update the design to that like for years.
And I think the iMac, didn't that go for a better part of a decade without an update? That design was
for
like
the design. I believe I think the 2013 was the redesign for the thinner edges, and I think that's the one I bought. That was right before they went into the 5K display, which is the one you have. So yeah, that was forever. That was a 10-year life cycle, and then even before that, the design before the iMac was not that different. It was just a little thicker. So yeah, I guess for the Mac, it's really not that important. Plus, I think the bigger thing there why it's not that important is because people just don't upgrade that often. I mean, these computers are so good that you use it until you really need an update, and then you update. Maybe that'll change with Apple Silicon. I don't really think so. We did see, well, I might as well just talk about it. We did see one new rumor about the Mac and the iPad, which is maybe we will start seeing OLED displays. Mm-hmm. apparently there's this new method of using 2-stack layers that will give you a brighter display. Interestingly, I'm not really sure what the issue is with the current OLED technology, because the iPhone has 1600 nits max brightness like the iPad and this new Mac does. So I'm not sure why we would need brighter displays, but I love bright displays, so I'm all for it. Basically, you would have 2 layers for each RGB color, which would, for whatever reason, lead to a brighter display. But the interesting thing about this here, let me bring up the article just so I can get some more details on it. This is not so much rumored for like a timeline, but rather that they're working on it and it's coming maybe 2023 or 2024. Apparently, it was released or slated to be released in 2022. But that just leads to the question, like, why would they do that when they just did the mini LED and it seems like they're really pushing for a mini LED?
That's a great question. I feel like, I guess in my mind, I guess OLED is what, like the superior, best of the best display technology right now, because each pixel can be individually lit up and not lit up when needed. You get those inky blacks, bright, vibrant. I guess OLED is sort of the end-all, be-all for display technology, and mini LED is close to it, but it's not exactly OLED. You have zones of pixels being lit up and dropped, not individual pixels being lit up. So I guess that makes sense that OLED is the best of the best as of right now, but mini LED still looks really good. Mini LED TVs are great. We obviously have mini LED on the MacBook Pro. We have it on the iPad Pro 12.9. And you get a lot of the benefits of OLED without some of the costs associated with it. And I think that's one of the interesting things is maybe Apple's waiting to make this move until the costs of OLED go down, or these panels or these technologies, so they can do this stuff. And then I don't know. Obviously, they have ProMotion OLED on the iPhone, but does that tech not maybe scale up to larger display panels? I'm not sure. But I think that we had seen, I think it was Mark Gurman, that in 2023, that could be the first OLED iPad. So I don't know. I'm not much of a display snob. Both of them look good to me. Obviously, OLED is sort of the best, so it'd be nice to see that. But interesting for them to sort of do this transition, sort of shuffle things around and go from LED to mini LED. There have been some rumors about micro LED and then make the move to OLED. I don't know. In my opinion, I'm in no rush to see OLED. I think in the next year or two it makes sense. Maybe by 2023 they've got all the kinks worked out, but I mean, I would not be surprised if we start to see the migration of all mini LED Apple displays eventually go OLED.
Yeah, no, I'm actually glad that they're not waiting for that, though, because I love these displays, these mini LED displays that we have now. And if they can make an OLED display that's even better, I'm all for that. And this is a nice middle ground. I guess the one complaint with like TVs for sure is that OLED just doesn't get as bright as the mini LEDs, which, like, on the phone maybe it gets bright enough, maybe you can't scale that up. I don't know what the reason is exactly, but I think that's kind of what we're going to be seeing going forward, rather than big complete redesigns. We're going to start seeing little features like that. Like, okay, now in 2022, this MacBook Pro is not going to have an OLED display. Everything else is basically going to be the same. We're going to have a new processor and an OLED display. That's the new thing. And then the next year, that's kind of what we've seen with the iPad. That makes a lot of sense to happen with the Mac as well. That's kind of it for that. Let's go Well, go ahead, yeah.
Well, speaking of that, just a little tidbit for you. I know Matt is lusting after the Pro Display XDR. Just because I saw this on Twitter and it just popped up in my head. I don't know if this makes a difference, but I did see that. Obviously, a lot of people use OLED TVs as monitors because high resolution, OLED text, stuff like that. I think someone has a deal, Amazon, the 48-inch LG OLED, I think, is on sale for like $1,100.
Yep.
Yeah,
I know that TV well.
Would you?
I look at it all the time.
Would you do a TV as a monitor? It's not the same as Pro Display, but
yeah, it's not the same. I definitely thought about it when I first moved to this new place. I was like, I'm gonna set up the TV as my monitor and have it like this huge setup. 48 inches for a monitor is a little big. I think, and it's not like it's ultra wide. It's like an actual like 16:9 whatever scale. So it's a little big for the monitor. Also, there are people that did that. I know Linus made a video. There was a few other people in that video that also use it, and they were really quickly within months complaining about burn-in. These are clearly not meant to be TVs. They're just smaller displays. That was kind of what made me not want to get one, plus the size. I think it's just too big. I love big displays, but I think even that is a little too big, at least for the setup I have now. If I had the perfect setup, maybe it would work, but not the way I have it now. Also, it's like $2,500 or something, so I'd rather just put that money to a Pro Display XDR, which I did look at when I was at the Apple Store. It still looks good as ever. I'm still in. I want it.
Well, I think that what you're going to end up having to do is what many people are going to do is buy the iMac Pro, because at this point it seems like Apple is going to give you a lower cost Pro Display XDR, but it's going to come in the package of an iMac Pro, because as of right now, we just got some new info on this. 27-inch ProMotion mini LED, probably like same ports as the MacBook Pro. I think even like the same chip options, maybe. So M1 Pro, M1 Max, and starting over $2,000. So maybe if you just wanted a nice monitor, you could do the base one and get, well, I guess I don't know how that would work, because you'd have to use it as a computer.
And yeah, and I don't think they'll let you do Target Display.
Yeah.
They kind of got rid of Target Display since the 5K iMac, so I don't think they'll be bringing that back, even though that would be great. I'd love that. Yeah, I guess a few questions about that. I think, yeah, the iMac Pro looks interesting. It's at the very least, I don't know if they're going to call it iMac Pro, but at the very least, it seems like a real product, this more pro-end iMac with the better chips and the better display. I'm all for that. That is the computer I want for sure. If I can't get a Pro Display, then this is definitely like a very close second. Maybe even like it's probably gonna have ProMotion, like you said, so it's probably gonna be better actually in some ways. Maybe not. And you know what I was thinking. I was looking into it, and the Pro Display actually has less LED zones than the MacBook Pro.
Yeah, so this could be a superior Pro Display.
Yeah, maybe it won't be 6K, but I don't care about that. Like 5K is plenty. So yeah, this seems like it could be the way to go for many people. Worry is that maybe it's going to be more expensive. There's not really any rumors of that, but like just looking at the specs and it's going to be a new design, all of that could very easily be more expensive, which is not great. But probably still cheaper than a Pro Display XDR, and you get the computer built in. Seems like the way to go. Question, though, is what do you think they will do with those chips? I know the kind of rumor is that it will be the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, or at least variants of that. Do you think we're going to see new versions of those, or do you think they're going to be desktop versions, even for the iMac? Because, I mean, the 24-inch iMac that we have now just has the regular M1 chip, so very possible that this, even if they call it an iMac Pro, it's kind of like the more consumer version Pro. So maybe the M1 and the M1 Pro and M1 Max still work perfectly fine there.
Yeah, I think as I think about Apple in 2022, I see 3 new silicon chips. One is the M2, which is going to go sort of in the consumer or whatever they call it for the MacBook Air, Mac Mini, stuff like that. I think we see a high-end chip or chips for the Mac Pro. But I think this iMac Pro is stuck in the middle. I think it's going to be an M1 Pro or M1 Max. That just seems to make the most sense. They've already got the silicon, and they can just slot it in there, and I don't think anyone would complain about that. So I don't think they're going to do Mac Pro chips, so I think it's going to be probably M1 Pro or M1 Max.
Yeah, and then I guess, do you think they would give you a one tier up to the MacBook Pro, like let's say a 64-core GPU option? Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see why not. I mean, I guess I was thinking, well, could they do more? Because technically this is like sustained power and they don't have to worry about battery life. Like, could they push these chips even more? But if the M1 is in the indicator, probably not. So I would assume it's the exact same options, and these chips are so good that you don't have to worry about battery or efficiency on the laptops, and it's going to be the same story on the iMac Pro. I don't know what else they could do. I mean, could they give you like more core options? I think it's going to be the same. I can't see them tweaking it anymore for the Pro. I think you're just the draw is going to be the power of those chips in a desktop level computer with the nice display. That's going to be the selling point in my opinion, because that just seems to make the most sense to me.
Yeah, no, I pretty much agree with that. I could see them maybe doing like an overclocking or something where they, since it doesn't have the power restrictions because it's plugged into the wall all the time, like maybe they can do something. Maybe they didn't do that on the M1 because like it's still the consumer level iMac and the M1 is plenty fast, so maybe that's why they didn't do it there. I could see that happening, because almost like how they talked about how efficient these chips are with the MacBooks, they can almost say like, and since we're not reduced by battery, like we can really push these chips to do the most they can, something like that.
Right.
I can easily see that happening. I guess another question though is for the future, we're expecting at some point a desktop level M1 chip. These M1 Pro and M1 Max and the regular M1 are all very much mobile chips, or I guess you could say, well, the M1 Pro and M1 Max are definitely mobile. The M1 is more consumer. So we've heard rumors of what we're going to see for the Mac Pro, but I guess the bigger question, not so much what kind of die we're going to see or anything like that, but do you think we're going to see that big of a jump in performance as we did from M1 to M1 Pro, or do you think it's going to be very minor? I have an idea, but I want to hear what you have to say first.
I think it's going to have to be a big jump just because this is the Mac Pro. This is Apple showing, hey, Intel, look what we can do, and we do it ourselves. I mean, they've already done it. I think I saw some headline was that with the M1 Pro and M1 Max, Apple wanted to show what they could do, and like, I forgot what the headline was. Like, they wanted to show what they could do. They wanted to blow it out of the water. Like, they wanted to show what they could do with that power. With the Mac Pro, you're not limited by battery life. You have presumably a bigger chassis for thermals. This is where Apple can kind of go crazy. And again, I think what we talked about last time, the rumor is like the chip on this Mac Pro could be like 4 M1 Maxes like put together. So I think it's going to be a crazy chip that just is blowing everything else out of the water. This is going to be where they can be like, hey, you want to see what Apple Silicon can do? Here's kind of our highest end chip that really lets you have unleashed performance. I think it will be a big deal. What's also interesting too is that the M1 is sort of like the everything chip. It's in the iPad Pro, it's in the iMac, it's in the MacBook Pros and the MacBook Air, the lower end ones. It's sort of like weird how Apple is like taking these chips and putting them in everything. So yeah. I wonder like where the line is. Are these desktop chips? Are they mobile chips? Or are they like sort of fluid chips that can go into whatever device Apple sees they would be good? And like, are we going to see like an Apple TV with like an M1? We've always seen these rumors about an M1 and an iPhone. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's going to be interesting to see how Apple continues to move their silicon chips around and put them in different products. And it's kind of hard to know where these chips are destined for, because I definitely think that the M1 Pro and M1 Max can be great mobile chips, but they can probably also be great desktop class chips in the iMac Pro as well. But I think the Mac Pro is going to get something special for sure.
Yeah, no, I think the same thing. And there's really one main reason for that. Like you said, this is really the let's see what we can do and let's really blow it out of the water. And the fact that we had such a jump from the regular M1 to now the M1 Pro / Max, they can't really. Here's the thing. Like, Apple is very willing to make very incremental updates. They do that very often. The A14 to the A15 and the iPhone, they barely talk about how much faster it is. They just talk about some of the optimization, some of the more machine learning it could do, that kind of thing. But they don't try to trick you into thinking this is like a quadruple the speed chip or anything like that. They're very fine to do a minimal upgrade and speak of it as such. But the fact that they talk about these in such a way that almost like they're really hyping it up, they wouldn't do that in my mind unless they knew they could really top this with the desktop level chip. Because if they come out and suddenly they're like, well, this Mac Pro is twice the speed as the MacBook Pro. I mean, like, well, that's not worth it at all. I just, get I guess twice the speed of a MacBook Pro is probably pretty good, but you know what I mean? Like something relatively small, incremental in that way. It's just not as exciting. Plus, the other thing to keep in mind is that these are, one, based on the A14 architecture. So these chips have been made for probably 3 years at this point, at least relatively final in their designs. So these chips are, like, they know what these chips are doing. It's not like they're making them right now and seeing what happens. They know how to market these. They know how to talk about them. So I think we're going to see big things with the new desktop level chips. Also, I don't think they would hype this up as much if they knew that next year with the M2 or the M1X or whatever they decide to call it, if that is such a tiny update and like barely noticeable, I don't think they would be hyping it up as much now. I think they have a 2 to 3 year roadmap where they know what these chips can do. And I think we're going to be for some big surprises coming in. I might be completely wrong, but it's just from the marketing, the way they talk about it. I feel like they wouldn't do that if they know that next year we're not going to get any changes. Like, it's going to be the same.
Well, especially like with the redesign too, and like how this is going to be like all new, and it's interesting because we just got the major redesign for the Mac Pro back in 2019, and now they're
that's another thing
doing it again. But I think that, like you said, this is their time. They've already kind of proven themselves. I think that Apple has done a great job proving that they know what they're doing and they don't need Intel. They can do things themselves. But this is their time to say, hey, professionals, those of you who want the very best, you want to buy these desktop crazy level computers, here's what we can do. And also, I'm sure they'll do some comparisons. Here's the highest end, they won't say this, but like the $30,000, $40,000 Mac Pro compared to the starting base $5,000 Mac Pro of 2022. And I'm sure we're going to get to that point where the changes will become much more incremental.
Oh, for sure.
Going to start to, like kind of brush it off. But I think that 2022 will still be another one of those big years. And then after, Apple will have some time in the next 3 or 4 years to sort of tweak. And, they probably won't even touch the Mac Pro for a few years if history has taught us anything. So I think this is their time to prove themselves one last time to the Hollywood studios and the music producers and all those who said it couldn't be done. And then they can sort of let that be for a bit and come back to the drawing board and work on something else. But I think it's going to be a pretty big deal, and it's going to be one of those announcements you'll remember as Apple once again just sticking it to Intel.
Yeah, and I think they've really learned their lesson about thermals and fans and all that kind of stuff. I think even though we might get a design that is like a similar shape / size to the trash can Mac Pro, I don't think we're going to get that design again. But like, that kind of almost that box size instead of what we have now with the current Mac Pro, I think they've learned their lesson about what they need to do for those thermals and that people really care. We now have ports on the MacBook Pro with very good thermal systems. That's another thing from my initial impressions. I've never heard the fans turn on, even when rendering and stuff. So that's good. I think they've learned their lesson there, and I think we're going to get something pretty interesting. The thing I keep thinking about, though, is like the current Mac Pro is kind of the weirdest computer that they've done in a long time, because they obviously knew they were doing all these other changes. Like, so was it just to like hold people over? But it's such an expensive computer. It feels like they could have done something smaller.
I think they needed to do something to make up for that debacle, and they probably even knew internally that, hey, we're probably not going to get to a new Mac Pro for 2020 until 2022, so they still have 3 years.
3 or 4 years.
So that made sense. And also, I have heard some people complaining and wondering, for all us Mac Pro owners now, will Apple offer us some kind of upgrade to Apple Silicon chips? Is it going to be modular? I don't think that's going to happen at all. I think there's a 0% chance of that happening. And also, not to be a little critical, but I don't think if you bought a Mac Pro, how do I say this politely? If you are spending the money on a Mac Pro, like you are in that professional tier, like you are in the tier you need a Mac Pro, you should understand that you're probably going to need to upgrade to a new computer, and there isn't going to be any sort of upgrade path for you. You shouldn't be complaining about selling or buying a new one, because that's sort of how that top tier works. I don't know. I saw some complaining on Twitter about people saying, oh, well, I spent X amount of dollars on my Mac Pro, and Apple's not going to give me an upgrade path to Apple Silicon, and hey, Apple's sort of just kind of like screwing us over. That's not what happened at all. You bought a really great computer that is still, by all accounts, a really great computer, and technology changes. Apple Silicon is progressing, and if you really want to upgrade, you're going to have to either spend the money and sell the one you have, or figure out something, because I don't think Apple owes you anything. I don't think Apple owes Mac Pro owners right now an upgrade path. I think that when you spend that much money on a computer, you have to understand that you're in a different category of not even consumer, professional, and that you're not going to be given like an easy upgrade path. I don't know. I think that there were some rumors about maybe Apple is going to give us some kind of modular design and you could put Apple Silicon in there, but I just don't think that's going to happen. And I think that you're going to have to buy a new computer. Apple has never really given anybody an easy upgrade path. And even regardless if you spent $2,000 or $20,000, you're sort of out of luck. But hopefully the idea is that during the last 3 or so years, you've gotten your worth out of that Mac Pro, and you can still use it beyond it. Just because Apple Silicon comes out doesn't mean that your computer's obsolete. It's just not the newest anymore.
Yeah, that, and I think the real reason why they released this computer is because it was kind of for the true professionals, not YouTubers, which we're professionals, but it's not the same kind of classes as some of these, huge studios and people that are spending $50,000 on computers.
Right.
I think the real reason they released it, even though it seems kind of weird for the timing, because they obviously knew this new Mac Pro was coming, I think they did that because they know there are those studios where Apple Silicon, sure, it's great for us who are willing to take that quote unquote risk, and also it's almost an experimentation at this point. Like, is this really going to work well? That's fine for us because it's not like life and death. We can figure it out, For these big studios, there's millions and millions of dollars on the line, and they just can't take that chance. So these Mac Pros, the current Mac Pro that we have now, they can upgrade the CPU, they can upgrade the GPU to these legacy hardware. Well, I say legacy, but they're, you know what I mean, the more traditional GPUs and CPUs that we already have now. They can use or replace those on their own. I guess another question is, though, how long do we think Apple's going to be maintaining that computer? Because I guess the idea is they don't have to maintain it because it's all user upgradable, which is why I think they did it. But do you think we'll ever see an update to this version?
I think that what we will see is Apple do what they normally do and give it 5-6 years of support. I mean, I think they're going to give it a good amount of support. Apple's not going to drop support for that computer tomorrow. Obviously, they put a lot of money and they invested a lot of R&D into it. And there's still a lot you can do and still a lot of upgrades you can make. I just think that, again, because it's a different class of computer, they're going to support it for a few years and then eventually they will drop it. And studios who make their money off of this will spend whatever it costs to upgrade and get the latest and greatest because they'll make their money back. It's like, I think of Marquez, for example, MKBHD. He bought 3 or 4 Mac Pros, probably spent at least over $100,000 on those computers. Very expensive investment. But that investment over 3 years has probably more than paid off. He's probably got more than enough value out of those computers. And when the time comes to upgrade, they'll make the switch. And I think that Hollywood studios, you buy the Mac Pro, you're going to use it for 5 years, and then they will upgrade to whatever the next thing is. I don't think that Apple owes Mac Pro owners anything special. I do think they are due support, which they will get, but I think that so it came out in 2019. I'd say less than 10 years, they'll probably start to fade it out, just like any technology sort of starts to fade out, and eventually it will sort of become obsolete, and you'll have to start to make your move to Apple Silicon. And I think that probably before that, the software will just become so much better and the optimizations will become so much better that you're going to be driven over. And obviously, if you're in a big production suite or whatever, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of different components, and those take time to switch over. They're probably not over to or even anywhere near Apple Silicon compatibility. So I would imagine that, let's say the new Mac Pro comes out in 2022, probably not till 2024, maybe even 2025. That's when a lot of these customers will move over once things are ready to go. And by then, you've gotten, 6 years of use out of your Mac Pro? So I think that was probably money well spent.
That while you were saying that, I totally agree with everything you just said. But while you were saying that, something that popped in my mind just because of the design of the Mac Pro, I feel like this is the Pro Display XDR podcast because I keep talking about it. But the Pro Display XDR has that design. At least initially we thought that because of cooling and that this was such high tech that they had to make it really crazy. But then these MacBook Pros have the same display tech with more dimming zones. Oh, I guess the screen's obviously smaller, but you know what I mean. And then the iPad Pro has it. It's like, did they really need to do that design? And has technology really changed that much in 2 years?
I mean, there's something about the fact that it looks really cool, and if you pair it with a Mac Pro, know this is Pro. This is Apple's Pro design language. We'd also even seen rumors that Apple was gonna bring that same circular metal design over to the iPhone. We had seen those patents,
I remember that.
Maybe there's a reason. I mean, I don't know. I haven't spent enough time with the Pro Display XDR to know how much heat that thing puts off and how loud it is. But I'm assuming
that's true. It could be crazy.
Probably for aesthetics, but also probably for some kind of cooling, I guess. But
it probably helps,
point.
so it's
that'll probably even make this next iMac Pro even better. Be look at this display tech and look how thin it is. We don't need any kind of thick, because that Pro Display XDR is pretty thick, and I don't know why.
Oh, it's pretty thick, yeah.
Maybe display tech has gotten more advanced than we thought originally, and they really had to do that. I think it was partially aesthetics, partially function, but I would not be surprised if the updated Pro Display XDR, whenever that comes, is going to be like super thin.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised about that. Kind of piggybacking off of that and going back to the iMac, we didn't really talk about the design very much of this new iMac Pro. I know initially when we were waiting for the 24-inch iMac that we got, we were expecting both versions, and we were expecting no chin. It was supposed to be almost like the Pro Display XDR, but in the iMac form. Do you think we're going to just see the 24-inch iMac as a 27-inch with like space gray? Or is it going to be this rumored, this ever wanted, lusted after iMac that we never actually got?
I got so excited. Remember when we thought that was going to come at the spring loaded? We're like, oh, we're going to get this really awesome looking like mini Pro Display.
Yeah, I'll never forget when I realized in their first intro video, you know, they have that product video. I'll never forget when I realized that not only did it have white bezels, which I've actually grown to really like. I can talk about that if we want. And that chin. I'll never forget. Yeah. I never forget when I saw that pop up. I was like, oh, ooh. It's definitely grown on me since then, but at first, it was not a good first impression.
Unfortunately, I think that the idea about this like mini Pro Display looking design is probably not going to happen. I think those days are behind us. I think, unfortunately, it's just going to be a bigger version of the iMac we have, and then probably maybe like some more muted colors, so maybe like a silver, like a dark space gray, maybe like a matte black. But I think, unfortunately, it's just going to be a bigger iMac. Because why would they change the design that much? The iMac Pro was just a dark version of the iMac. I think it's going to be basically the same thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm okay with it because the more I've used this 24-inch iMac, the more I actually love the design. I think it works great. The white bezels, I don't know if this is why they did it, but it definitely has this. I've heard people say this, and the more I think about it, it makes sense. Is I have it against my wall. And the white bezels actually disappear. I don't notice them because I have a white wall, and it almost feels like the display is floating there. It seems kind of fake and like cheesy, but I see the effect. It's really nice. I'm okay with having that design as long as it has black bezels for the Pro and like space gray color. I'm all for it. It's perfectly fine with me. I am starting to think though that these rumors for this the chinless and super thin display or iMac is actually maybe an updated Pro Display or an updated display. It actually makes a lot of sense. Like, first of all, it was expected to be 32 inches. That's the same size as the Pro Display, and it seems like that's not happening anymore. It's a 27-inch. We were also expecting maybe the Pro Display will get updated to something thinner and a different kind of display. So I'm wondering if that 32-inch version of whatever that was supposed to be is still coming, but it's not an iMac. It's a different display, either a Pro Display update or maybe the rumored and long-awaited more affordable display.
Well, we know Apple is working on a updated Pro Display, so that would make sense. And maybe, I mean, what's funny is the Pro Display right now looks great. So
it looks great. Yeah.
I guess they could slim down the bezels. Maybe it would be OLED. Maybe that would be the big upgrade. But I could definitely see a upgraded Pro Display XDR coming in the next couple of years. But yeah, I think that the iMac, unfortunately, maybe not white bezels, maybe able to do black bezels. I don't know, but it's definitely, I think it'll be black. It's going to be the same design. So don't hold your breath for the concepts and renders of what we thought was going to happen, because it's not happening anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I'm okay with it. I have been living with an M1 Mac iMac. I love the design. I think it really works for what it is. I just hope they make the right changes to make the Pro version more Pro, and I think they will. You know, I'm looking at our kind of list of what we're going to talk about. I think we hit everything pretty well. I mean, we went through a lot of stuff in it. Yeah.
We did for a specifically slow Apple week. We sure did hit on a lot of stuff. Obviously, there is a lot we want to get into in the coming weeks. And, of course, we want to, again, hear from you guys. Especially, I feel like we need to do – I want to do a dedicated episode just on, like, buyer's advice. Because I feel like I've already gotten questions about AirPods 2 versus AirPods 3. If you're looking to buy go ahead.
Let's write that down, and we'll do it next week, because I think the holidays are coming up. It's a good idea to do it then. Holiday special, buying special.
We'll go through all the lists, all the categories, because I think we can give a lot of insight into what's worth the upgrade and what's not. And then obviously we want to hear from you guys. So I know it's a little early, but if you're thinking about your holiday shopping list and who gets what, who's been naughty or nice, you can text us 949-354-3508. Let us know kind of what you're in the market for. If you're kind of deciding between one configuration over another, if you're wondering if something's worth an upgrade or worth the extra money, Matt and I will break down everything and kind of tell you what to get. And I think, next week we will do sort of a special episode you can reference on, hey, like, here is what to look out for Black Friday, here's what the deals are, and then kind of going into the holidays, here's who should get what depending on your budget. We'll do a special next week and kind of break all that down. So we'll look forward to that. I'm looking excited for next week's episode, but for now, think that about does it for this week.
I got one more thing for the true fans. For the true fans that stuck through our promos and stuff. One, I got my AirPods Pro fixed.
Nice.
So I took them in. They replaced them, no problems, no questions asked. They were way more broken than I realized. Not only did I have the connection issues, which I've talked about many times, but the transparency mode and the ANC did not work very well, because as soon as I put these in, it was like a new day. They work so much better. It was a big deal. And the person that helped me at the Apple store actually said, basically the lifetime of these is like 1,000 hours. He says they have like truck drivers and stuff that come in all the time who wear them all day, and that's what they figured out. It's like 1,000 hours, and they just break. So good to know. Probably a reason not to buy them, but we can talk about that next week. The other thing though is I did buy AirPods 3. Not much to say here. They're AirPods. If you like the original AirPods, these are probably the ones to get. If you don't want to get the AirPods Pro, I like them, but and compared to my broken AirPods Pro, these were way better. But now compared to my fixed AirPods Pro, I'm back on the AirPods Pro. I like them a lot. Not much to say there, but figured it was an update because I did say last week that I might be getting them, and I did. So, yeah, that's about it, though. Just a quick update for all of our true fans, for those Brads out there who like to listen to the very end.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, did you already give out the hotline? I can't remember.
I'll do it one more time just for fun. 949-354-3508. Make sure to come back next week for our special buyer's guide.
Definitely.
I think that about does it this week. Thanks, guys, so much for watching, listening. We'll see you right back here next week on the Apple Circle Podcast.